Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear me? Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear me? I hope you guys can hear me. So let me know if the audio is working. Hello, everybody. Alright, perfect. So there is audio. I just had to remove a few things. So we are back. So basically, what I said while I was muted for some reason, I don't know why the audio was not working, but for some reason it was not working. That's most likely because I have not streamed since probably March or April. So that's most likely why it is the way it is and why it was muted. So basically, I was going to stream on the severe weather event, but by the time I got home, the main event had diminished, and specifically the tornado threat had diminished, and that was exactly what I was planning on streaming. However, now that that has kind of died off, I decided not to stream that, and I said, why not stream on Tropical Storm Fred? I know a few people have already done a short updates live stream wise on Fred, so I said, why not do the same thing? So, in this live stream, we are going to be going over Tropical Storm Fred, going over the expected peak, the latest advisories, track, where it's going to make landfall, overall that, what can we see impact wise, and whether it's favorable for this to become a hurricane. So, if you guys want to know all of that, I recommend you guys do watch this stream as well. Be sure to share it with friends and family. So, first off, you can kind of get a better idea that Tropical Storm Fred has now officially made landfall across portions of Hispaniola, obviously the region of Dominican Republic, specifically out of the Hispaniola region. So, there you see kind of an area of convection at that moment. So, this has officially the low pressure, the surface low actually is over over the Dominican Republic region. So here's a look at the better update. So this is actually as of 18Z. There's a low pressure located into portions of southeastern and south central Dominican Republic. So the surface low is actually right there, and the convection is kind of just to the north of the actual surface low itself. So let's go back. You can kind of see a lot of that main convection is kind of more isolated to the north of this actual low pressure, but this low pressure is basically just made it on the coast, and obviously it's likely to bring in more effects such as rain, flooding across portions of the Dominican Republic, and actually we do have, I believe, the whole country, I believe so, is under a tropical storm. Never mind, not the whole country, but much of the actual country so is under a tropical storm warning there. There's a look at the actual latest update 5 p.m. advisory, which came out a few minutes ago. And they have this low pressure now fully located in actually the central portion of the country. So actually, the 18Z on tropical tidbits was a little bit delayed, but they had the actual low pressure itself now far deeper into the Dominican Republic region, actually in the very, very mountainous region. Actually, this thing was found actually, or it has not really done the track really the National Hurricane was really expecting. The National Hurricane Center really expected yesterday this thing to kind of really go just skinning Dominican Republic and kind of staying kind of far north of Cuba. But it looks like there has been a southern trend here because of that new location of that low pressure itself. So again, this is as 5 p.m. today. Tropical storm watches now widespread across the Central Caribbean, including portions of Cuba, are now actually under this tropical storm watch. So definitely very interesting that we may actually see this from right the Cuban coast, and that may or may not affect this system. So we may see some land interaction as the storm goes further into the Caribbean waters, into the deep ocean heat content, or the storm may get lucky and actually not get into or not really get or not suffer really much from land interaction. So there's definitely multiple possibilities that can come from this track. However, it's still hard at the moment to get an exact track because as of the past few updates, there has kind of been a more of an elongated low pressure, so it's kind of been hard whether it was more south, whether it was more north, and that's exactly not why we are getting a better idea of where this storm is and where the track is going to be, as this storm has kind of really got an actual surface low and not multiple mid-level low pressures. So As you can see, the National Hurricane Center wants this to weaken to a tropical depression. So right now it's actually 40 miles an hour. And the National Hurricane Center wants it to be 35 miles an hour as it goes into Haiti and then portions of eastern Cuba. And that's exactly why there are no tropical storm warnings. There are no tropical storm warnings out here for the Turks and Caicos region because there's not going to be actual sustained tropical storm winds except gust a tropical storm, which obviously will verify as a watch. So let me actually look at the actual chat here. I've not really gone to the chat right now. So what's up, Lily? What's up, Storm Chaser? How are you doing? Pushmaster said Miami will spare. It looks like Miami will get spared. There really hasn't been much confidence at all with Miami getting hit by anything. It's kind of more of an Elsa. For those who remember the track of Elsa, Elsa obviously had Miami in the middle of the cone, and then obviously as it got closer, Miami slowly but surely got further to the edge, and at some point they were no longer in the cone. Nope, this will not hit the Bahamas. Let's see here. What are your thoughts on the wave behind Fred? If you're talking about Invest 95L, I think this is rather interesting. Actually, I will be going to I'll be going into depth within the actual the wave off Fred. So obviously now it's at 30 to 50%. So it has obviously increased both 48 hours and 5 days. And actually, for those who know, on the Discord server, which I'm actually about to send a link here. So for those who are not joined, who are not a part of extreme weather, I recommend you guys join the Discord below. I promise when I say it's not toxic, it's actually not toxic. But here's a look at Fred at 40 miles an hour. Minimal center pressure is actually 1,007 millibars. So it's kind of what the GFS has been hinting at for the past few days. And it obviously has slowed down now to west-northwest at 15 miles an hour. So it definitely has started to slow down. Obviously, at some point, it was west-northwest at 18 miles an hour. And it's most likely slowing down because it is now getting further to the Greater Antilles. We kind of saw the same thing with Elsa. Obviously, Elsa was further south and did not hit any of really the Greater Antilles, per se. I guess you could say that. And it started slowing down once it got closer to Jamaica and that general region. Obviously, I believe Elsa got to like 28 miles an hour, something like that, 29. I think Elsa even hit 30 at some point. But there's Invest 95L. I think this one's very interesting. And I would not rule the possibility for this becoming Grace. I don't really like to pre-name anything. But when there's actually confidence and actual interesting, I guess, conditions, kind of conducive conditions somewhat, sometimes I pre-name systems, but rarely do I. And this may or may not be a storm that I may pre-name. I wouldn't rule out the possibility if this does become Grace, and I definitely would not rule out the possibility if it becomes a tropical depression. But overall, I think it's very interesting, this wave. I mean, it has a pretty good amount of moisture, a good amount of overall rising air within it. I mean, I don't see a problem. There's obviously a really good amount of water vapor within the actual Invest itself at the moment. So you can kind of see, look, like the conditions will become more conducive for development of the system. And a tropical depression could form by early next week while moving generally westward across the tropical Atlantic near 20 miles an hour. Again, this thing is actually moving quite fast as well. And this system could reach portions of the Leeward Islands by late Saturday. So definitely got to keep a close eye on for the weekend for areas that got hit by Fred. Good thing Fred wasn't really that strong when it hit the Lesser Antilles like it did kind of with Elsa. Obviously, Elsa became a 80 mile an hour hurricane before the Leeward Islands and the Lesser Antilles. But obviously, it looks like there's another threat for the Eastern Caribbean, including, obviously, Fred is actually right on the edge of the actual area of potential development. So that's kind of showing you how it's going to be a very, very similar area. So that's kind of what we have so far with the actual National Hurricane Center. So if I could give you guys a better look at what we're actually seeing here within the actual setup and the actual climatology and just the overall surface-based map on Fred, you can kind of see there's a trough kind of right here in the orange, that dash orange line. The trough is right here. So that's kind of where you're seeing here that area of low pressure. Kind of seeing here conducive conditions for thunderstorms, overall the stormy weather. And there you see, like for those who've been watching my videos on this, that there is going to be a VP or actually sorry a PV streamer, sorry, not VP, a PV streamer, potential velocity streamer, which is going to bring in a lot of shear associated with this high pressure itself. So just to the actual west, or sorry, to the east of the actual high pressure you see there, there's going to be a lot of shear there. As well, there is going to be another trough kind of setting up kind of right here. You're going to be seeing a low pressure. It's going to kind of set up right here. And that's also going to bring a good amount of shear across the Northeast Caribbean. However, since this thing's moving west-northwestward, it shouldn't get affected too much. However, you can kind of see there is a good amount of a dip in the jet stream, basically. So we are going to be seeing still some shear right here within the actual northern part of the trough. And there you see the tropical wave behind Fred. And that's exactly the edge of where we have Invest 95L at the moment. Let's see here. Let me actually look at the actual chat real quick before I actually get to the discussion. Hi, I'm in Southwest Florida. I think this is going to strike the Gulf of Mexico. Yes, I actually think this have a very good chance to actually strike the Gulf of Mexico. Before this thing became a PTC and we actually got a track, I was saying in my videos that actually got cut off from the audio issues, for those who remember that. I was saying the CMC seems more likely and more reasonable than the GFS at the time, which was showing it going towards Georgia. So yeah, I think it's very likely that thing will move into the Gulf of Mexico and possibly pose a threat for the Florida Panhandle, specifically Mexico Beach and Apalachicola. Adrian, I'm in the center of the cone. It's consistent. Well, I mean, I would not rule out the possibility for something in the Panhandle, which obviously you are at. What's up, Matt? How are you doing? Do you think this track is shifting east? If anything, it's shifting south. You can kind of see they're getting closer to Cuba. I mean, obviously, I don't think it's really moving eastward per se, but I mean, it's still looking at a threat for the Big Bend region, Apalachicola, Tallahassee is basically right down smack down the middle here. I'm actually on the very, very, very edge of the actual cone here. You can see I'm right here. I'm on the extreme edge of this cone. I actually may get, maybe once extratropical or post-tropical, I may get something very interesting there out of Fred. So I mean, I think it's going to be very interesting, though, if I get anything, because I already got Claudette, and I think that's really it. I only got Claudette this year. You're welcome, Teresa. Again, I do recommend you guys subscribe to the channel as well if you guys are new. I'm getting very, very close to 6,100 subscribers. So I would really appreciate that. I think right now we are at 6,082. So we are definitely climbing quite quickly. So I would recommend you guys do subscribe if you are new. Do you think it will hit Pensacola, Florida area? I think that's not out of the question. Yeah, I wouldn't think that's out of the question. I mean, I think the whole Panhandle of Florida has to be on the lookout. Even if you're near, like, where Elsa made landfall, near Cedar Key, all the way up to, like, Pensacola. I think Pensacola marks the far west area of where this is possible, even though Mobile and Gulfport's basically in the cone. I do think, as obviously the storm gets closer to the Gulf of Mexico, and obviously as the 4 to 5 day forecast becomes a 1 to 3 day forecast, it's going to start winding more towards the Big Bend area. I think, obviously, I hate to bring up the name Michael, but I think this will make landfall in a very similar area to Hurricane Michael. For those who remember, Mexico Beach slash Apalachicola, I think it's kind of where we could see a general landfall or the actual surface low. But if you're in Pensacola and you don't get a direct landfall, do not rule out the possibility for some flooding. However, the worst flooding obviously will be to the northeast of the actual low pressure, so that'll kind of be Georgia and north central Florida. So here's another look here at satellite imagery. I know I've been kind of talking for a while without showing the actual models. I will start showing the models very, very soon. But right now I'm kind of going to the old current forecast with satellite imagery. And obviously I want to go over the National Hurricane Center 5 p.m. Eastern update. There's another one that's going to come out, I believe, at 8 p.m. Eastern. I may or may not be streaming by then. I really doubt I will be streaming that late, because I do actually have a good amount of homework today, which I've completed around half of it, so I guess I'm being somewhat productive today. But here's a look at the actual satellite imagery on Fred. So obviously, Fred's not looking too shabby. It's going to start losing some structure and obviously some convection as the storm goes over Dominican Republic in the mountainous region. Because obviously, we all know land is bad. And guess what's worse than land? Mountainous land. And it's exactly what's going to be going over. And actually, it's going to be going over almost all of Hispaniola, including the Haiti and Dominican Republic, the border of Haiti and Dominican Republic, which is extremely mountainous. I believe there's like elevation of over 10,000, 15,000 there. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not really great with the Caribbean geography, but I know there's definitely over 10,000 feet up there. And we all know that's obviously not going to be really conducive. And that's actually really hurt this. That's actually going to really hurt the storm here. Thankfully, it's not the slowest moving storm. So there's kind of good and bad with its speed right now. There's good that it's good that's not going to weaken as much. Obviously, I'm not saying good that's not going to weaken as much because I want to see a hurricane. I'm just saying that because obviously as a forecaster, you like to see storms and you like to see overall storms overall. I mean, I'm not going to say I want to see a hurricane with this, but I'm just saying it's good the speed for this whole system that it's going over at this mountainous region within a decent speed. It's not going the fastest, but it is going west northwest at 15 miles an hour, which is not bad. However, it will most likely slow down furthermore once it actually goes over Haiti. And at that point, it's going to have some really warm waters ahead of it, especially if it goes rather slow. It's going to be something very interesting as it makes its way towards the Keys and Key Largo and Key West. So that's going to be very interesting if you are in the Keys of Florida. I would definitely keep a close eye on this. I wouldn't say really prepare. I think it's still too early, and there can obviously be a lot of track differences. Obviously, the same can maybe further south and hit Florida. Or sorry, not Florida. Sorry, and hit Cuba. I didn't mean to say Florida. And it's found more south, and it skins Cuba coast instead. Obviously, there's a ton of things and a ton of factors that will actually affect the strength of the storm. So if you're in the Keys right now, or if you're in the Panhandle right now, Florida, I wouldn't really freak out or actually prepare for anything at the moment. It's still very far out, or I wouldn't say very far out, but it's not the closest from you if you're in the Panhandle specifically, and a lot can change. Even though the storm has already formed and we have a better idea where it's going to go, I would not start preparing right now or really any time soon. Obviously, if you're in Cuba, it's a completely different story, you guys, especially if you are in the north central portion. And by the time it actually becomes a tropical storm again, I would definitely watch down. And if actually you're in the big island of the Bahamas, I would as well possibly keep a close eye on it because you guys will be in the northeast quadrant, meaning you will get the worst flooding, strongest winds. Obviously, we know the strongest winds were found on recon yesterday in the northeast quadrant. That's actually brought the reason why Puerto Rico saw some pretty good winds overall yesterday. Let's see here. What's up, Robert's girl? Welcome to the chat. This one is trying to copy Irma. I mean, track-wise, I guess you could say that, but we all know it's not going to copy Irma strength-wise because obviously, at this point, it would have been a Category 5, like 170. 175, I think it was 175, or actually no, I think at this point it was like 175 near Dominican Republic or something like that. Where do you find a satellite? I use this on trackthetropics.com, but let's actually now move away from all of that, and let's actually look at the actual model itself. Actually, let's do the tracks and intensity guidance real quick. So here's a look at the actual 18Z. I believe 0Z doesn't come out for another little bit. Yeah, 18Z does not come out for a little bit more. But here's a look at the actual track guidance on 18Z. You can kind of get a look that they actually have somewhat pushed further west a teeny bit. Because obviously, for those who remember, I believe 12Z had like a ton of models, or a decent amount of models, kind of like this near St. Petersburg, and like that. So I think they kind of have a better idea. It's going to be rather westward, but obviously not that west. We kind of have a better idea of where it's probably most likely going to go. Oops, that's a bad arrow. And it's probably going to, oops, that's even a worse arrow. Let's try again. It's probably going to go somewhere like this. So if you're in Key West, I would keep an eye on it because obviously it looks like you guys will most likely get a landfall. Not by a super big hurricane, nor maybe not even a hurricane at all, but you're looking at possibly a decent tropical storm at that point. So definitely keep an eye on it. I would definitely not prepare for like another 24, 36 hours. Obviously, it's going to be rather close to the Cuba coast here, so that may or may not affect Atlanta interaction-wise. The thing is that low is kind of further north like that, and obviously we're really aiming for the northeast quadrant. It looks like the northeast quadrant could definitely still strengthen, even if the low pressure is not far off from Cuba. So overall, we just can't really watch out. We should watch out overall for whether land interaction is going to be a problem or not with Cuba. At this point, I think it may limit it from like rapidly intensifying, because obviously this area is bound. I mean, we all know this area. Let me do a bigger circle. This whole area is bound to rapidly intensify storms. 1935 Hurricane Andrew, obviously Dorian, which is obviously kind of on the edge of that circle there. Was it the 1917 Key West, even though Key West is obviously over here, but this whole area, you get the point there. That we've had multiple storms in the past that have completely RI'd in this area. So, obviously, if we were talking about the thing being far to the north like this, we would be talking about a completely different system. I mean, we're talking about a hurricane in this scenario if it were this way. North of Dominican Republic, north of Haiti, far north of Cuba. Obviously, Turks and Caicos and Bahamas really won't do much. The one thing, if it were this far north in this system, in this scenario, with the exact same conditions, it still would not be a hurricane because of the trough and because of the potential velocity streamer or potential vorticity streamer, the PV streamer associated with the high pressure. So either way, even if it was this far north, I think we'll maybe talk about a category 1 maybe, but definitely not a major hurricane. But again, Key West shouldn't be a massive problem for you guys. We're gonna keep a very close eye on it. You guys still have a good time frame. I'd say you guys have a good 3 to 4 days before anything. And then obviously it's gonna most likely do kind of skin the western Florida coast, and then make a landfall near the Apalachicola region, near Panama City as well. And we have a few trends, 3 or 4 models, kind of taking it far west and actually way deep into Cuba, and having to make landfall there near Pensacola. So I think this is overall a reasonable cone. I think so. Obviously, I do not have any confidence with it hitting Homestead or Miami. I think this is my general cone. I know it's very small, but I have very high confidence with where I think the thing will go. So this is overall my cone here. So I think it's going to go hit the Key West region or Key Largo. It may slightly go over the mainland Florida region down here, but not an actual landfall for the populated southeast Florida region. I do not see that at all. The intensity guidance, let's see what the 18Z is showing. So there it is, obviously at a tropical storm. The majority want to have this weakening, obviously, to a depression because of land interaction. Only 3 or 2 want to have this continuing to be a tropical storm. And obviously, what other model than NNIC and SHIP, which want to have this at a tropical storm the whole time. So overall, though, it's going to weaken for a little bit, probably 12-ish hours, maybe 18 hours is going to be at a tropical depression. And then obviously, as it goes out into the warm waters and more conducive environment, it's going to reform to a tropical storm Fred, or as a tropical storm again. And some models are getting it to a pretty high-end or moderately high-end tropical storm. A few kind of have it up to around 60, just under 60 knots, which is basically around 70-ish miles an hour. And then obviously the NNIC wants to have this basically just under 65 knots, which is basically just right on the edge of Category 1 in tropical storm. Let's see here. Let's look at the chat again. I keep looking at the chat like every 5 minutes. Oopsie. Alrighty, so let's see here. Irma was a monster. It sure was a monster, that's for sure. Let's see here. Does this storm spread out? What do you mean by that? Do you mean like how widespread is the wind field with the storm, or? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, by spreading out. If you mean like wind field or like dying, or like I'm not sure what you are meaning by that. But you just let me know what you mean. As soon as it gets close to Florida, my dad will go on the run. As in evacuating, or what? Random videos. Nope, you should be good in the Bahamas. Let me go ahead and show the track, the National Hurricane Center track. So basically, you are not on the cone, obviously. However, if it does kind of do just a slightly more northeast turn or northwest turn, like this, if it were to be just slightly further north, you could definitely get possibly some decent winds up here, specifically. What is it? Not Nassau. Not Nassau. Not it's Nassau, right? Nassau. I think it's Nassau. I think that's how you pronounce it, but correct me if I'm wrong. But Nassau, which I believe is right here in the Big Island, will get possibly some tropical storm wind max gusts. All depending on the actual strength of the actual storm itself. Let's actually get a look at the actual advisory. I have not looked at the advisory yet, so the actual forecast position and max wind. So obviously initially it's at 40 miles an hour, then weekends over at 35 for 24 hours, and then back to around 48 hours at 40 miles an hour. So at that point, it's going to be very unlikely that Nassau gets anything tropical storm related. Wind-wise, obviously, let me look at the track again. So obviously, if it's 40 miles an hour here, so 2 p.m. Friday, so it's basically 48 hours, it's going to be 40 miles an hour in that far south. So Nassau may get 20 mile an hour to maybe 30 mile an hour, 30 mile an hour wind gusts, and that's going to be max wind gusts. So Nassau should be pretty good. Yes, Adrian, he lives in a manufactured home, so he gets scared of getting stuck. Well, Candy, for mixing it better, I would recommend maybe sharing the stream or anything. If that helps, I can help give him more details, I guess. Nassau. So I guess I was pronouncing it right. I think the first time I said something else. Or is it Nassau? NASA? Like NASA? Like NASA? Not, so is it not NASA, or I'm very confused. So is it NASA? Okay, I think I give up for now. But obviously very warm waters across, especially the Gulf Stream here, which obviously will be going over the Gulf Stream, the southern end. So it's a pretty good gyre right there. Some nice currents, pushing some really warm waters up there off into the Carolinas. So obviously right now it's going to be going to a pretty warm environment, specifically in the so-called RI zone, which I just said, which I mentioned like 10 minutes ago. So it's going to be going out basically around 28.5 degrees Celsius waters, and eventually it will move into over 30 degrees Celsius waters. Alright, so yeah, 30 degrees Celsius waters basically at some point. So that's going to help it get to a stronger strength, which obviously 60 back in the Gulf of Mexico. And actually, if I'm being completely honest, I could see as high as 65 or 70 before landfall on the Panhandle. So it looks like that's going to be around there. I know I've seen a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, saying a hurricane's possible. However, I just don't see it really with the amount of shear we're talking about, how close it's going to be, the trough, the tut. Obviously, it's just not looking the greatest for a hurricane, obviously, because of not only that, but a ton of land interaction. It's going to lose a ton of progress. So for those who are saying a hurricane, I've seen a lot, especially last night. I don't think it's completely ruled out to be 75, but I really do not see it being a hurricane. If I'm being really honest, I could see 70. 70 is possible, if I'm being honest, in the Gulf of Mexico with a more conducive environment. So Nassau, there we go, Nassau, like NASA, Nassau, there we go. Let's actually look at the actual discussion. During the past several hours, the center of Fred has moved inland, obviously in the Dominican Republic. This storm continues to produce an area of convection near the southeast of the center. However, the low circulation is losing some organization as it passes over mountainous terrain, which I mentioned earlier on. There has been no observations near the center recently, so the initial intensity of 35 knots is based mainly on weakening from the previous over water intensity. So we have not had any recon or ASCAT really with this as it's moved inland. So they have just put it to 40 for obviously being obvious reason. That's going to, of course, weaken. However, it could be weaker. It could be weaker. It could be definitely weaker. It could be maybe 35 miles an hour, but it is now 40. The initial motion is somewhat uncertain. Some erratic motion is expected during the next 12 hours or so. As the center moves over the mountains of Hispaniola, after reaching the water, the cyclone is expected to move west-northwestward on the south side of the subtropical ridge through about 60 hours or so. After that, a period as Fred, or let's see here. After that, a northwestward motion is expected through the end of the forecast period as Fred moves toward a weakness in the ridge. The track guidance becomes a bit divergent during this time, with the European, Canadian, and the H4 model showing the track near or over the Florida Peninsula, while GFS, UK Met, HMO models show the center passing south and west of the Florida Keys, followed by more northward motion over the Gulf of Mexico. So basically, in summary, there is a lot of uncertainty with track, which I mentioned, within the elongated low, with obviously the ridge and the trough. It's going to be very uncertain because there's so much, there's so much differences between models. Obviously, the H-Wharf has been consistent with hitting Southeast Florida, like Miami region, while GFS has been consistent with it going south into the Keys, and obviously the CMC as well has been pretty consistent with that. And actually, the CMC was the first model to even show it going to the Gulf of Mexico out of all the models I just listed. So I think it's overall going to be very uncertain, which is why I said I wouldn't prepare yet, because you don't want to prepare for something that maybe does not even go over your area. So I think that's just too early to prepare at the moment. So here's like the actual key messages. Tropical storm conditions are ongoing across portions of the Dominican Republic. Tropical storm conditions are possible in the northern Haiti and southeastern Bahamas this evening, and in portions of Cuba by tonight. Through early Thursday morning, heavy rainfall could lead to flash urban and small stream flooding, along with possible rapid river rises and potential mudslides in the Dominican Republic. So obviously all this is only a very low-end tropical storm about to be a tropical depression. It's going to bring in some significant flooding across the region. Obviously, it can lead to possibly for some mudslides. So overall, it's going to be very, very, very interesting. So if you're in the Dominican Republic area or Hispaniola, do not just downtrend the system because it's not a hurricane or because it's only 40 miles an hour, because the thing can still bring in some good amount of rain. Obviously, the main killer in storms in the tropical system is obviously flooding. So let's actually see if we have anything else really to look at here. So here's another look here at the actual European probability and all that. So a 90-100% chance for depression. This obviously doesn't matter. It's already a tropical storm. But let's actually look at the actual models. We have not looked at the models yet, and we have basically been 40 minutes in. So let's now look at the actual models itself. So GFS, like I said, has been pretty consistent with this storm going to the Keys, while the H4, which is basically I call it an anthric kilometer of the tropics, is showing it being a hurricane hitting southeast Florida. Which, if you are in southeast Florida and that scares you, do not take the H4 100%. Take the H4 with a grain of salt. You know how you guys take my preliminary winter forecast with a grain of salt? Do the exact same thing with the H4, but less, because the H4 really likes to show rapid intensification bias. I mean, they just love it. They love showing storms that aren't even close to RIing, and they still have RIing. So that's exactly why I say take it with a grain of salt, like less, like half a grain of salt, basically. Like that's, if that makes sense. But let's now go ahead and look at the actual GFS. So the GFS basically there, and the next 6 hours or so there we have Tropical Storm Fred obviously dying out, and there we have Invest 95L. This is obviously the tropical wave behind Fred. As you now go later on, you can kind of see obviously Fred falls apart and loses a ton of convection overall initiation because of the mountainous terrain. And there's a low pressure right there. And there's Invest 95L, 1,013 millibars within the next 48 hours. So overall, quite interesting there. A decent amount of decent pressure there in the African wave or the monsoon wave. But there we have there we have Fred at 1,010 millibars just outside St. Petersburg and just the west of Tampa Bay. And then 1,007 millibars and making landfall across portions of the Pensacola / even near Fort Walton Beach there at 1,009 millibars. So very rather weak, and obviously GFS really has nothing at all, whatsoever for 95L. So I think it's very interesting that GFS is really kind of not going what it typically does with storms like that. But let's now go ahead and look at these CMC. CMC, like I have said, has not only been really more of a stronger, has really been showing out of all the global models that being the strongest, but it's also been very, very consistent with its track. And actually, it looks like the National Hurricane Center cone and forecast obviously is very, very similar to the first runs of the CMC when this first became an invest. So let's see what you guys are talking about in the chat while this loads. Oh, Candy, I'm glad you sent it to him because obviously I can help with any question he has, so I can help minimize the fear. So obviously CMC wants to take a little while. This is gonna take a little bit while for the CMC for some reason. It's taking a little bit to. There we go. It's starting to come out. I don't know why the CMC is taking a little bit to actually refresh here, but it's getting there. I don't know why the CMC is. It's getting there. Right, just wait a teeny bit. But yeah, the CMC is taking a little while to get the actual whole forecast. So right now it's kind of stuck at 102 in that region, so it should be coming out very, very soon here. But at this point, I will just watch or I'll just monitor the chat as it happens. What's up, Bright Moonlight Happiness? How are you doing? What's up, Sebastian? How are you doing? What's up, Winter Queen? How are you doing? Looks like a lot of people are joining now. All right, so I think we got far enough in the CMC. So this actually looks like the CMC now is taking this storm actually up the Florida coast like the GFS showed. So the one time I actually showed the CMC on a stream, it decides to completely change their track and completely change their forecast and strength, because obviously we all know the CMC was extremely consistent with this when the Gulf of Mexico and actually making landfall as a tropical storm. But no longer they show them, they actually do what the GFS showed in the very first day. So that's actually a very interesting move. Let's actually now get a look here at what the icon wants to say here. The icon, I have not checked the icon in a little while. Clear gray skies said tornadoes are the only scary part of tropical storms. I mean, tropical storms can have some pretty intense storm surge and as well flooding. Obviously, I think flooding is more serious when it comes to tropical storms. Obviously, it depends on the severe weather setup. That obviously has a lot to really take a factor in, because obviously you don't have a tornado with every single tropical storm. And obviously, you see basically flooding and storm surge with basically every tropical storm. So I think a flooding and storm surge is a bigger threat, really. But I'm not sure why these models are taking a while to actually load. We are trying to get a hold of the icon right now. We are the whole straight 24 hours right now. You can kind of get an idea in the next 24 hours that the CMC, or actually sorry, the icon, wants to have it basically just north of Hispaniola. Basically, it's exactly where the icon has it within the next 24 hours or so. So I think the icon may or may not take a GFS trend, or if it's going to go with the CMC and turn north. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting what the icon wants to have for us. Yeah, flooding is pretty scary, Candy. I mean, it can definitely a pretty big threat with a ton of tropical storms. I forgot, was it a Milda? No, it was not. Was it a Milda, or I think it was a Milda or something like that. Broad, extreme storm surge as a tropical storm in Texas. I think it was Texas. Yeah, I saw that as well, Brian. And what's funny about that? GFS showed a major hurricane hitting Texas on July 4th, and that obviously did not verify. But let's see the icons finally trying to come in. I'm not sure why. I think let's just wait for the icon to load. Let's just give it its time. And let's go back to see a better idea on what it looks like on satellite imagery here. So here's the latest look here on the actual IR forecast. So there you see the convection's really dying out here. This is not really a diurnal minimum. It's just weakening because landfall, obviously, is going through a very mountainous area. So I think this is going to obviously become a 35-mile-an-hour tropical depression by maybe 8 o'clock Eastern time. The next update is obviously 8 o'clock. So I think it's going to be very interesting here. But I would kind of go into depth within 95L right now. But look, the models really want to give me a hard time with loading. But let's get a look at the actual moisture. So obviously we know there's a lot of dry air. So we obviously have a lot of that dry air kind of coming in really from either SAL or kind of coming in there from the actual Bermuda High itself. Obviously very dry environment within the Bermuda High. Very strong ridge kind of associated. You kind of see a lot of that shear bringing extreme SAL, specifically off areas of Northwest Africa. Obviously, as well, there is another area of dry air that's going to be obviously kind of similar to this wave. However, it was kind of cut off by the African easterly wave, which is now no longer an African easterly wave, but it's basically now part of just an area of moisture that kind of survived the dry air. Obviously, 93L had to be sacrificed. 93L is basically sacrificed to create Fred. So that's obviously kind of funny that 93L had to sacrifice its life, and it gave obviously all of 94L's moisture. You can kind of see, look at that. We can actually see, there you see a lot of that moisture. This is actually the African easterly wave. You have 3 low pressures all in one. This is the definition of an African easterly wave there. We had a ton of areas of circulation, a ton of areas of surface lows, a ton of areas of lower pressure, a ton of areas of vorticity. That's exactly what we see in an African easterly wave. But here was 94L, and there was 93L. And you can see there's a really intense amount of dry air, and it looked like it was going to cut off and kill 94L. But what happened was that 94L kind of really ate up and accumulated all of 93L's moisture and took it for its own, and then that dryer snuck its way in and killed 93L. It's exactly how 94L got its act together, became a PTC, then became Fred. And obviously now as we go further on, obviously this will continue to have a pretty large moisture bubble. We should not really worry about it dying from dry air. However, it's going to really get ripped apart there by the Hispaniola and land interaction. And there shouldn't really be a big problem with dry air within the next few days. Really, it's going to have a pretty good and even larger moisture bubble. It's actually going to have a lot of moisture kind of coming from South America, actually. A lot of that moisture not only came from 93L, but we also had a lot of kind of moisture come off South America and help stabilize it where it is at the moment. $95L was I think it's going to be very interesting. I mean, you can kind of see that they're going to actually, speaking of 95L, here is 95L right here at the moment. So